All right, do you have your Bibles here? Raise them up and you got them, okay? Or some of you, I see you, Frank, out there where you got it on your phone. There you go. And he's got it in Spanish or Italian. Is it Italian or Spanish? Espanol. All right, so it's Lucan, right? St. Luke we're going to go to. So turn with me to St. Luke or Luke, and we're going to get there. Let's see if I can find it here. Make sure I'm in the right spot. It's chapter 10 of Luke, and we're going to move down to 25. And I have some images soon here we'll see, and but as we get there, it looks like there he is. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll be going through and I'll let you know, Algerson, when we put it up on the double, because there's going to be a moment where all of us can kind of look and see who our neighbor is. Our neighbor, that's right, neighbor. You got it. It's chapter 10, Luke chapter 10, verse 25. And it says, on one occasion, an expert in the law. Now, my dad used to say this. An X is a has-been, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. Sherry laughed. That's good. All right. An X is a has-been, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. I used to love that as a kid. I'd always perk up. Dad would have these little things. And sometimes we've got the experts. Yes. You have an X? Yes. No, you have an expert. Okay, very good. We have an expert on location. An expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Oh, isn't that nice? Jesus is busy healing people, caring for people, and someone comes along and decides they're going to do the politicking in public. Now, we're not having any of that today, right? Have you ever heard any of these campaign things where a question is so obvious it's not a question but a statement? I remember, it's always fun as a pastor. You'll have one of those questions, and the question takes many forms as it moves along. And you kind of go, is there a question in there? Did you have a question, or was that a sermon? You right? So, this question comes up to Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? So, as always, Jesus says, well, remember, to the devil even he said, it is written. Remember that? But here he does it in the form of a question. What is written in the law? And by the way, when you say law, nomos is in Greek here, but actually it's in reference to something called Torah. Torah is a Hebrew word that basically, it means law, but literally it means the 5 books of Moses, but even further, it means the entire scriptures. So it's like when you say the word Bible, you know the word Bible? Actually, it comes from the word biblos, which means book. That's all it is. What's the book? And you'll hear this in Old English. The good book. Reynold, I'm talking to you. He'll say, what's in the good book about this? And I go, that's the biblos, or Bible. So in the same way, Jesus says Torah. It's a all-around Hebrew word that means the scriptures. Okay? So it doesn't really mean what's in the law. Because sometimes we'll say, which law is it? You know, is it thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not... No. That's included, but it's in the story of the Bible. What is it that allows you to inherit eternal life? What is written in HaTorah, he says. He replied, how do you read it? Jesus asked this expert. Verse 27. Are you with me still? Did I put you to sleep? Okay, hopefully not. He answered, love the Lord, your God, with all your what? Heart, all your soul. You know what suke means in Hebrew? In Greek, suke means being. It means everything. It's breath, the spirit, pneuma, plus soma, or the body. Together, its entire being, suke. We get the word psychology from that word. Psychology comes from the word soul. To understand a soul of a person is asking questions and discovering who they really are, right? So love the Lord with all your heart, with all your being, or suke, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and all your what? Mind. So all these pieces are together. Jerry used to ask me, my uncle Jerry used to ask me, John, we would have these discussions, John, how can you give Jesus only 10% of your life if it says all? All means all. Everything of you. So all means all, right? Doesn't all mean all? Yes, all means all. Very good. And so Jerry would always talk about that, all mean all, with all your heart, with all your soul. He actually said, so how can you love Anna if you're giving all of your love to God? And I say, because Anna loves God with all of her heart. That's why. That's what pulls us together and makes our love powerful, right? Because we love each other with all of our heart, and that love is connected with Jesus. I know. It's one of those things, We sometimes like to have that atheist part of us. But God is involved in all of it. All means all. So this guy says, all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, and love your what? Neighbor, unless they don't cut the hedges. All right. I'm going to have a sermon one day with a Pink Panther cartoon, but that's not today. I love one of the messages given in a Pink Panther, powerful message, but we'll get there because I don't want you all to throw me out of the church yet. First thing I thought of when I thought of neighbor, does anyone know who this guy is? Now, when you're older, younger people are like, who is the white guy? Who is that weird white guy putting on his shoes and putting on the shirt? And he would talk like this. Hi, neighbor. You go, as a kid, at first you like it as a kid, and then you get older and you're like, ooh, that's kind of cringy. Right? It's like one of those pastors. Isn't that sweet? But the message this guy gave was something else. Who is your neighbor? In fact, Wonderful Day in the Neighborhood was the whole point of that, was so that children could learn to care about others who were different. Oh, what an amazing concept. We have lots of devices on us. One of them are these things, right? These things here. See these? You know what these things are made to do? Is to put us with people that are just like us. That's what Facebook and it's basically, it defines you. On YouTube, I get different observations, or different streams to me than my son gets. I was checking with my son, John. He gets a whole bunch of different algorithms, and we're choosing the same things, and yet he's in his 20s. I'm in my 50s. And YouTube decided these are the things that need to go to you, and those are the things that need to go to him. Isn't that interesting how we're divided by our society? It sounds good from the outside, but it divides us, all under the name of equality and diversity. We're divided. Oh, did I step on something? He says, and love your neighbor as yourself. self. Verse 28. Now, Jesus is going to ask this question. You have answered correctly, Jesus says. Do this, and you will live. Verse 29. Now, here comes the expert. He says, it says in the Bible, he wanted to justify himself. Who here likes to justify themselves? It's called projection a lot of times. In our lives, Pastor John will say something, or someone else will say something, and it hits us. And so to justify ourselves, we'll start saying stuff, or not liking things, or maybe liking them, but liking them in a certain way that angles everyone to this side, because that's how psychology works. This expert did not even realize he was being manipulated by his own issues. He wanted to justify himself. Jesus knew his heart. But sometimes we don't know our own hearts. Trust the one that knows you better than yourself. He wanted to justify himself. So he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? My neighbor? Let's take a look and see. What's my neighbor? We have Mr. Rogers there, but let's move forward. Who's that? Is he your neighbor? He was a guy who played, actually, Mr. Rogers. Excellent film. Excellent film. It came out, I think, in 2020 or something like that. It didn't hit the theaters that hard because of all this pandemic stuff going on. Incredible film. Are You My Neighbor? It deals with how the guy was a pastor, actually, and he felt the need to teach children in a way they understood instead of just standing in a church talking to old people, right? So he decided he was going to do this on his own. But let me ask you, is Tom Hanks your neighbor? Well, Forrest Gump. I mean, he's Forrest Gump. How can he not be my neighbor, right? Right? Let's see. Oh, does anyone know who that is? Dr. Ben Carson. He's a Seventh-day Adventist, by the way. And yes, he did get involved in politics. And our church denomination, I'm not sure how in agreement many of our leadership are with his positions, but you know, that guy took common sense principles of the body and applied them to the heart, work of the heart. He saved many lives, incredibly. In fact, the big one, if you've not seen the film, Gifted Hands. You got to do that sometime. Powerful. You know, he was a neighbor just like you and me. He grew up, I think it was Baltimore, in the slums of Baltimore. And it was when he actually did something terrible, is when he learned he needed to give his life to Jesus. He became a Christian, Seventh-day Adventist. And through Loma Linda and all of the institutions going up, he was involved and became an incredible doctor. World-renowned doctor. Don't judge the book by its cover. Let's see, someone else, a neighbor. Who's a neighbor? Oh, man. We know him. Actually, he was over in Tahunga. Something happened, or Sunland. There was a deal where there was some kind of thing that happened where someone was throwing water. It was something else. But Trujillo, man, he's serious. But he's an actor, but he's a good guy. But you see him in his movies, man, you'd be scared, especially if it's Machete or something like that, right? I remember that was the old days of Tarantino movies, right? You have these guys. Everyone's tough, and you know, and there's Trujillo coming along. Maybe it's Robert Rodriguez. I'm not sure which one. Well, actually, it's probably both. Spy Kids or whatever. Anyway, Trujillo is amazing. Is he your neighbor? Well, we've got a lot of neighbors that aren't going to be shown here. How about him? You like him? He's one of those oligarchs. Control a lot. Zuckerberg, right? And sometimes we start to hate people. And we need to watch out. Because who's your neighbor? Let's keep going. What's this? Looks like we have a Palestinian protest. Thank you. Immediately, those who are on one side and the other side start to separate out. Who's my neighbor? Oh, it's not those people. But then there's the other ones. Look at those at the Wailing Wall. Now, I know we have Hasidim here. Now, the Hasidic Jews are actually a little more toward the Palestinian argument, actually. They're not Zionists. Some are. Do you see how we're divided? You see this? Who's my neighbor? Who is your neighbor? Let's keep going. Look at him. Hey, I got a haircut, so I don't look like him anymore. Kim Jong-un. He's in charge of North Korea. He very much controls that country. If you've ever seen from outer space at night, only Pyongyang has power and light. The rest is dark. They've been that way for years. Oh my goodness, look at that. Look at that. Those protesters that are protesting all kinds of things. Are you a girl? Are you a boy? I don't know. How many genders are there? I don't know. 98, whatever. Are they my neighbor? I know we don't want to answer, right? They are. Here's the hard part about being a neighbor. Is as a neighbor, they're there. You can't control them and tell them what they should and should not do with their lives. Respect. While at the same time, you need to be respected. Oh, who's that? As we get into protests, we start seeing the police. Are they our neighbors? Some of us immediately, yes. The other ones, I know the Police Lives Matter sticker you have on the back of the car sometimes. If you have one of those, you get it because of that. You'll get a scratch on your car sometimes. But then you put a Black Lives Matter on there and all of a sudden you get a scratch on the car, right? Welcome to politics. I'm going to keep this one up for a second while we look at the text. Let's read. In reply to the question, who is my neighbor? A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Immediately, if you know anything about ancient Israel, you know this is a big deal. Jericho, totally different cultural. It's on the edge, the West Bank. And today, Jericho is run by the Palestinian Authority. Jerusalem was the Judeans, or the Judeans. Totally different culture, and you can see it. In fact, if you remember in the story of Jesus, you're a Galilean. Immediately, they pigeonholed Jesus. They said that to Peter, you're a Galilean. Oh, just because I'm from Galilee doesn't mean I like Jesus. Remember that? When he betrayed Jesus. You've got all these cultural realities, just like Los Angeles. Oh, you're a white person, so this is what you think. Oh, you're Mexican, oh, so that's what you think. Oh, you're Chinese, oh, that's what you think. Oh, you're from Iran, oh, that's what you think. Oh, you're Armenian, oh, that's what you... It's hard with Armenian because Armenian, just like Jewish, has so many different countries. Armenia is over the top sometimes. There are Armenians that are in Lebanon, and they're in Turkey, and they're all over. So just like with the Jewish, you have that kind of interconnection. Ashkenazic, Sephardic, different types. We immediately assume things, don't we? Just because someone looks a certain way or is from a certain place, we can't assume. That's a stereotype that hurts us and hurts others. He was coming down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he was attacked by robbers. Let's see. I wish those guys were there, huh? all of a sudden, when the robbers come, you wish those guys were there. Let's see the one we hope. Oh, wait. Is he a good one to have there during the rob? I don't know. What do you think of him? What's the feeling you immediately get? Isn't it interesting how we are? What's this? Our border. What's our view of our neighbor? Those coming across. Now, some of you may not even be thinking about that. Others are, believe you me. Who is your neighbor? Those who we see as robbers, who are they? Which one? Well, my goodness. What is this? Who is that? Another person that sometimes is seen one way by one side and another way by another side. But it gets worse. Oh, maybe our neighbor is Asian. Maybe not. How do we think about that? This guy was overcome. Oh, what about him? You know, this is an amazing time in politics, isn't it? This is an amazing time in politics because we are so completely divided, aren't we? You remember Chewbacca guy? Remember January 6th? Probably YouTube will now put a little thing inside the thing, but remember that guy? Such a divided place, and we have all these different opinions. One guy says, oh, it's great. The other guy says, no, it's terrible. It's yeah, I knew a laugh would come. There you go. He's not as orange as normal. There's another guy. Wait, no, that's a better one. There we go. Wait, that's a better one. Anna and I. That's when we were in I think we were in Scotland at that time. Is he your neighbor? I would hope so. Do you like having this neighbor? Don't talk about the guys beforehand. Jesus answers this question. Jesus answers this question. And by the way, as he answers the question, I want to bring you to one shot here. Take a look here. This is the area right now. On the way from Jerusalem to Jericho. Imagine no roads and no lines and no power lines. It can get dangerous out there. Lots of crevices. This guy was walking along and he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. Verse 31. A priest, some of yours will say a Levite, but a priest happened by the same road. When he saw the man, he passed by on where? Woo! A Sadducee. Now this is going to deal with Sadducees and Pharisees. Sadducees were the left side of the political system. Okay, they were the left. They were the religious left. Generally speaking, they did not believe in the resurrection. I'm talking about at the time of Jesus. Okay, I'm not talking about the Mosaic system. The Mosaic had gone away with Rome. They made it a lottery system where priests would buy their way into the temple because there was a lot of money at the temple. So the rich families bought their way in. And the Sadducees, they did not believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in angels. They basically believed in gold. And that's what Jesus said. He says, you guys will swear by the gold in the temple, but you don't swear by the God in the temple. You know? Remember that? The Sadducee comes along, the limousine liberal comes along and goes on the other side of the street. Now, before you disconnect from me, because I'm going to talk about the conservative coming next, because both sides have issues, and both sides are your neighbor. Who's really the neighbor? So the Sadducee goes to the other side of the road, and he goes by. He doesn't want to get intertwined. He says, I'm sure there's a government program that can take care of that, right? Somebody else can pay for it, not me. Right? Let them go do it. So, he goes like this. The Levite comes across on the other side. He goes on the other side. Then comes the Levite. Now, this guy is the Pharisee. This guy is the Pharisee. And that's the right side of the political spectrum. Those are the ones that believe in the Bible by the text. And in fact, they tithe everything. They'll tithe even the mint. They're the ones that say we need to all be what's right. And the temple has gone away from it's dark over there, but my house is the place where you need to meet God. I'll show you the Bible, and I'm going to make money off of that. That's the right more. See what the Levite says. The Levites say, I'm going to take care of him. What does he say? He came and he goes, you mean both the left and the right, the conservative and the liberal neighbors do the same thing. They go to the other side of the road and walk past. Now, if they're being seen at church, they help very easily. When everybody can see it, that's great. I'm going to help out. But when it comes to life, on the other hand, what do? I hope you're not a Levite, a Pharisee, or a Sadducee. I hope you're a Jesus-y. Or perhaps a Samaritan. Here is how the Egyptians viewed Samaritans. Look at that. Look how the Samaritans looked there. The Canaanites. They were the ones that were in Israel before the Israelites came back from Egypt. They took over the areas, and actually there was a lot of war and a lot of problems. And then what happened is when the northern kingdom of Israel fell in 722 BC, the Canaanites intermarried with the Israelites. So when Israel was taken to Babylon and they came back after 70 years, they started fighting with these people, and these individuals had Mount Gerizim as their holy place, not Jerusalem. And they were trying to, the Jewish people were trying to rebuild Jerusalem. And if you remember, constantly they were in problems. So they had to, standing in the gap. You ever heard of that in Christianity? You had to put people at night in where the walls had broken down before it's built to stand in the gap. I remember that. In Sunlantanga, we were building a wall around our church. And there were a bunch of drug dealers that were dealing drugs on the campus there when I first got to Sunlantanga. And so we had to push back with a wall. And I remember Jesus, how do you like that name? Jesus is the guy that did the work. And he said, Pastor, I got to have one of my guys sleep here at night because the guys say they're going to kick the wall down at night with the cement drying. I said, okay. So we called the cops, and the cops were doing all these roundabouts, and there was a guy snoozing out there watching the wall. Yeah, standing in the gap, right? And so it was interesting how things don't change, and yet they do. The Samaritans. Verse 33, but a Samaritan was, as he traveled, came where the man was. And everybody that knew this story knew that it was the end. Who's my neighbor? I know my neighbor is the Pharisee or the Sadducee, but that's Samaritan. He's going to finish the job. The guy that comes from Jerusalem is toast when that Samaritan shows up. But what does the Samaritan do? There came a man, there was the man, and when he saw him, he took what? Pity on him. You mean the guy that you and I thought would finish him off actually would take pity on this poor Jewish soul who had been beaten up? And when I say Jewish, I don't know if they're Jewish. Maybe it was a guy from wherever. Who knows? He was from Jerusalem. But that doesn't mean he's Jewish. It could have been anyone. But what we do know is that the Samaritan showed pity. That Samaritan who knew not God, that we all know, cared more than the people who knew God, or thought they did, or said they did. My question to you is, who is your neighbor? We judge so harshly. We drive in traffic and we can't stand others around us that cut us off. I have learned in Los Angeles, Anna and I were talking about it, because Anna says, you know, the blinker needs to be a little longer, John, beforehand. I said, no. In Los Angeles, it's like Washington, D.C. I've driven in many places. You have to do the same strategy. You never tell anyone where you're going to go, because the guy will be all slow. The minute you put the blinker on, they right up. So what you do is you follow the rules, while at the same time you play the rules. You put on the blinker for a half a second, and then you fly in. There you go. And then the guy comes right up on your backside, right? And then they slow down again when they forgot, and they start messing on their phone, you know. That's how it usually goes. You're not supposed to mess on your phone in the car. But I'm sure that happens. My friends, we all judge each other in so many different ways. Maybe the brother or the sister that we have, we don't even know about because we're so busy trying to exclude ourselves from their presence. I remember as a child when I was I was a pastor's kid. We moved about every 2.5 years. And I remember going, and I went to New York in Old Westbury, and it was like, I think it was 4th grade or 5th grade. Sometime in the middle of the year, I had to change schools. And I was always annoyed that I was somebody that no one knew in the class, and I didn't really want to push myself because everyone will think you're pushy. And the cultures were always different everywhere I went. And on top of that, in New York, I was one of the few white guys that were there. I had a Jewish relative, and when I say white, I'm talking about not Spanish white. You know, that's convoluted. Anyway, never mind. But the thing is I was from Middle America coming across. And that's what I'm getting at. And I complained to the teacher, and I said, I don't have any friends here. And you know what my teacher said? This reminds me of my grandmother. Well, John, a friend will make himself friendly. Of course, I was annoyed at her. But she was right. Maybe the reason why you don't have certain neighbors is because maybe we're not neighborly. Are you with me in that? Maybe the very person you think is going to finish the job that the thief did, maybe that very person will be the person that is the ace in the hole. But because we judged them so much, we weren't able to have them as our friend, our colleague, our person. Sometimes we're so busy trying to find people that we like that we find people we don't like. Maybe, just maybe, let Jesus be the determiner of who your neighbor is by proximity. Maybe God brought them there for a reason. This guy comes and he took pity on him. He traveled with him. He bandaged up his wounds. He poured oil and wine on him. Wine. It's fermented. Not supposed to have wine. Well, this guy did. I guess he was one of those guys. But he poured it on the sores. A little of that alcohol burn out the infection. Put this man on his own donkey and brought him to the inn to take care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii. So in today's 1 denarii is generally paid for workmanship, and I have found that inflation is hard right now. Many workers that are day workers get about $200 a day, okay, now compared to maybe a few years ago. So that's about $400 in today's culture. Took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, look after this man, he said. And when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense that you may have. Verse 36. Are you there with me in the text? Which of these 3, did you notice that? Which of these 3? The Pharisee, the Sadducee, and the Samaritan. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The X says the one, he can't even say Samaritan, the one who had pity on him. Jesus said, be neighborly. Do what he does. That's how you love your neighbor as yourself. It doesn't mean agreeing with someone. It doesn't mean giving money to someone who's just going to spend it on booze. It means caring. When someone needs money, instead of just giving them cash that they look like they're going to spend it poorly, maybe go to McDonald's and get it. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Go get them something to eat that they actually need. You'll find out who's really in need when you do that. If there is someone in need along the road, help. I mean, some of you don't know how to help, and that's okay. But I mean, those of us who do, let's help. I remember I got a couple in my church that went running out there. Susanna was stuck on the road. Remember that a couple weeks ago? We were at potluck. I couldn't even get out there. We were running around out there trying to figure things out because her brakes had just locked up right in the middle of the street off on the exit ramp for the highway. Well, thank Jesus they locked on the exit ramp and not on the highway. Go and be a neighbor. You know, in the book of Revelation, it says, chapter 7 of Revelation, it shows 144,000, and this 144,000 is spoken of. They said, so you're hearing it. But then when you open your eyes and look at who the 144,000 are, it says after this, verse 9 of Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, after this, then I looked, and there before me was a what? Great multitude. They had no number. It was uncountable. From every nation, tribe, people, language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, and wearing white robes, and were holding palm branches in their hands, and they cried out in a loud voice, salvation belongs to God, who sits on the throne and the Lamb. In other words, God doesn't judge you by what tribe you're from. You're from everywhere. God has somebody. He has neighbors for you. What if you noticed your neighbor was someone that might be someone that's your neighbor in heaven? Have you ever thought about that? Even if they cook things you don't like the smell, even if they cut things you don't like them to cut, even if they don't cut things you're supposed to cut, even if they grab the fruit right over the wall, even if they talk in a different way than you're used to, maybe it takes us to be a neighbor to someone else at times, for us to discover who our real neighbor is.